Warning: this video has the possibility of becoming incredibly redundant in the future and is only made for the sake of theory crafting purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. If you've ever browsed the following social media platforms, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, or even Facebook, you might have plausibly come across this term, brojo. But what does it mean? Who does it refer to? Well, you're lucky I'm here, for I will give you what is essentially a crash course of where this idea came from and why it actually has the possibility of becoming true. Welcome to the twin theory. To shed some light, let's start with the basics. Who is brojo? See, this all started when a Japanese person realized that due to Japan reading a person's name in the order of surname to given name, what the Western fandom has come to call Sojo was actually Genichi. Genichi, translated, means the strict one. The first point of interest is the one in his name, as if there were multiple. And the second comes from the fact that the surname Sojo literally means twin castles. The thought is simple. Twin as a surname must mean that there exists more than a single child. In short, a twin. Why a brother, not a sister? That thought was given reason in chapter 8. Sojo is dead. We saw him explode. He is gone for good, and fans were left dumbfounded. Bakeru makes the trauma sorcerer display what his past looks like. A flower field drenched in blood with corpses hanging from atop. And to not explore this flashback, even a little bit, it felt wrong. But just like Chihiro saw the trauma of that dinner scene from his perspective, so too did fans start to speculate that what if what Sojo saw wasn't actually him, but him looking at someone in that flower field. And this is where the theory gets real interesting. Chapter 18 introduces the former Enchanted Blade wielders. 4 of them are grouped up in a very small but detailed panel, but the final one is shown as a faraway shot, locked up in what seems to be a jail cell. Fast forward to the ending of chapter 21, and we finally get a look at his face. The resemblance is like no other. Unwashed, smelly black hair? Check. Black eye markings under the eyes? Double check. Similar nose and lips? Check and check. This is it. It always bugged me. Why was Sojo given the Cloud Gouger? Why do the Hishaku not seem to care about his death? Did the plan even consist of the Cloud Gouger, considering they only cared for the suitcase? But if Sojo had a twin, and that twin was the former Shinuchi wielder, all the unresolved plot points would come to make sense. Why? That is where the etymology and the concept behind the Shinuchi Blade comes to play. The Shinuchi translates differently depending on the context, but in katana creation, this term turns into masterpiece, the star of the show. And with all this in mind, Kunishige seems to hate and regret creating this blade. So much so, in fact, he locks it up more tightly than any of the other blades, even if all of those blades were originally meant for murder. So what is it then that makes this blade so different? The villain of Kagurabachi, currently John Doe, believes that the blades have no will of their own, but can be turned into slaves for anyone to wield. Chihiro, on the opposite hand, believes that the blades choose their owner. And this, I believe, stands true for all 6 of the enchanted blades, apart from the Shinuchi. When Kunishige describes the blade, he uses the word different, so we can actually start to get a grasp on what this blade might be when we come to understand what is the regular nature of an enchanted blade. The ability to choose its owner. This is where real-life Japanese history comes to play, but just stay with me, because this really sticks, like a lot. You've probably heard of the infamous swordsmith Sengo Muramasa. Simply put, he's the most famous swordsmith in Japanese history, bar none. What you may have not heard, however, is that there's a common term used for all the blades he created due to folklore and popular culture that lines up one-to-one with Kagurabachi, but specifically the Shinuchi. Yoto, the enchanted blades. Well, in his case, they're more so called wicked katana, but you get the gist. Muramasa's most infamous creation, aptly named the Muramasa, shares an eerie similarity with that of the Shinuchi. Almost as if to purposefully parallel Kunishige's mentality, Muramasa was incredibly proud of making this katana. Having led a life of continuous misfortune, those negative emotions piled up one after the other, which then climaxed at the creation of the Muramasa blade. Known for having a captivating beauty to its blade's sharpness, and that captivation being reflected through the few times we've seen outsiders speak of the Shinuchi, hints at this connection. The Muramasa has been said to be so beautiful, in fact, that even peacekeepers and the ones who were against war at the time still got charmed by the blade's enamoring beauty. The ones who were to wield this blade would be taken over by a strong sense of bloodlust, one rumored to have been created by the negative emotions of Muramasa. These negative emotions tended to be so strong, in fact, that more often than not, the wielder would not even remember having done those acts of terror in the first place. The origin of this sentiment stems from many different places, but the idea stays the same. These blades are created by a man of such caliber nobody could ever rival him, yet have such an ominous, cursed attribute to them. That is a perfect description of Kunishige. And yes, inspiration can come from multiple places. Kunishige is as much inspired by Muramasa as he is by the real-life Kunishige. There is an argument to be made that one of the former wielders is the Masamune to Kunishige's Muramasa. And since we only have one panel, that's way too big of a reach, I'll leave that as something to think about. Now, it takes no real expert to realize that Sojo was kind of a psychopath. And with that line of thinking in mind, drawing the line between him and the possible twin being equally as psychotic isn't that far-fetched. And now we get to the crux of the theory, the Shinuchi being the epitome of what an enchanted blade is supposed to be. A will so strong it cannot be contained. In chapter 32, we are told that sorcery itself requires a trained body and perfect circulation of Genryoku. In short, a stable mind, one that isn't plagued by negative emotion. It is then within reason to argue that the enchanted blade and Chihiro's 3-year training looked something like that as well. The Shinuchi wielder has a peculiar epithet Kyora attaches to him. Master Swordsman, viz., or the raw Japanese version, Kensei, Sword Saint. The other 4 wielders are not given descriptory epithets, which makes you ask the question, what did he do to earn such a title? And if there was a blade so powerful that the people who've attempted to wield it end up killing themselves in the process, would a man like him, a person so insane and psychopathic to begin with, that could resonate with the insanity of the blade itself, be worthy of being called the Master Swordsman, conquering and being able to control a sword nobody else could? In a similar fashion to how nobody else could be the next Kunishige, nobody in this world could be the next Shinuchi wielder. Whether the sorcery power the blade owns manifests in the form of meteorites, crystal spikes, a tsunami, or any of the other phenomena we see in this image is up to you to decide. In an interview you've probably seen by now, Takeru Hokazono admits that at first, Sojo was designed to be one half of a duo, but he then claims after discussion we settled on the current character. While this may sound like strong evidence against the theory, there's no actual case closed confirmation that the duo no longer exists in the main series we're following. We've gotten the why, when, and who for this theory, but I'd also like to introduce the how in the form of previous foreshadowing. As mentioned, Brojo is under heavy surveillance in the Kaminabi headquarters. However, both Azami and Hideki are said to be assigned to the Rakuzaichi, leading me to wonder how exposed and vulnerable they are right now. Boss Hishaku says he wants to wield the Shinuchi, but they already had the weapon. His goal must include the wielder due to the lifelong contract being active, so there's only one option here: a jailbreak. Whether the Hishaku boss wants to kill Brojo or make him serve under him, That's too hard to guess. But I imagine the Rakuzaichi will end off with the Hishaku surprise attacking the Kanunabi headquarters. But they're theories at the end of the day. That's also the fun part in making them. Will they come true? Will I look like a clown? I guess we'll see.